Title: The Mirror in Room 213. There's a legend about Room 213 in the Calhoun Hotel. The kind of story people dismiss as a ghost tale, something whispered over a few drinks or used to scare the new employees. But legends, as Sarah would soon discover, often have a way of coming to life when you least expect it. Sarah was just passing through town. She didn't care much for ghost stories, and after a long day on the road, all she wanted was a bed and a shower. The Calhoun Hotel was old, sure, but cheap, and she was on a tight budget. Room 213 was available, and that was good enough for her. The receptionist had hesitated before handing over the key.
"You sure you want that room?"
he asked, the words barely above a mumble. Sarah didn't give it a second thought. A room was a room, right? The hallway leading to room 213 was dimly lit, the lights flickering occasionally, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Sarah reached the door, inserting the key into the worn lock. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a simple, unremarkable room. Faded wallpaper, an old bed, and hanging on the far wall, an enormous mirror framed in dark, polished wood. Something about the mirror made her pause. It seemed out of place, too grand for such a rundown hotel. She walked over to it, wiping the dust from its surface, revealing her reflection. She looked tired, worn from the long day, and yet something about the way the reflection blinked, just a half-second too slow, made her uneasy. She shook it off. "You're just exhausted," she muttered to herself. That night, Sarah lay in bed, struggling to sleep. The room felt colder than it should. The air was thick, heavy, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She tossed and turned, pulling the blankets tighter around herself, but sleep wouldn't come. Then she heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Sarah sat up, her heart racing. The sound was coming from the direction of the mirror. She stared at it, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, the tapping continued, growing louder. Her pulse quickened as she swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she approached the mirror. She hesitated, her hand hovering just inches from the glass. Her reflection stood frozen, mirroring her hesitation. And then, it blinked again, before she did. Sarah gasped and stumbled back. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts as she stared into the mirror. There, behind her reflection, was a figure. Tall, shadowy, its eyes glinting in the dim light. It stood in the corner of the room, still as a statue, but unmistakably watching her. She spun around, expecting to see someone or something, but the corner was empty. The room was empty. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, standing behind her reflection. It didn't move, didn't blink, but in the mirror, it smiled. Sarah screamed and reached for the lamp, flicking it on in a panic. The room flooded with light, but the figure was gone. The corner was empty. Only her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed and terrified. She tried to calm herself, telling herself it was just her mind playing tricks. She was overtired and the mirror was old. Maybe it was warped, distorting what she saw. But as she stood there, the tapping returned. Tap, tap, tap. She backed away from the mirror, her legs trembling, but the sound grew louder. The glass began to ripple, as though something were pushing from the other side. Sarah watched in horror as cracks began to spread across the surface, spider-webbing out from the center. And then, with a deafening crash, the mirror shattered. Shards of glass exploded outward, raining down around her as she ducked, shielding her face. When she looked up again, the figure was no longer in the reflection. It was standing right behind her. Sarah's scream was caught in her throat as she felt something cold and skeletal brush against her neck. She spun around, but there was nothing. Just the broken mirror and the silence of the room. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled back, stepping over the shattered glass. The air around her had changed. It was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. And then she heard it. A whisper, faint but clear. "Don't look." Her eyes darted around the room, but there was no one there. The whisper grew louder, more insistent.
"Don't look."
Sarah's hands shook as she clutched at the edge of the bed, trying to keep her balance. The room felt like it was spinning, closing in on her. She needed to get out. Now, but before she could move, the air in the room shifted again. She felt it before she saw it, a presence, cold and malevolent, pressing down on her from all sides. The shards of the broken mirror glinted on the floor, and in each one she could see them, eyes watching her from every direction. And then, without warning, everything went silent. The whisper stopped. The tapping stopped. The room was still. But Sarah knew, deep down, that she wasn't alone. She took a deep breath and, against every instinct in her body, she looked into the largest shard of glass at her feet. The figure was there, standing over her, its mouth twisted into a hideous grin. Its eyes gleamed with something dark, something ancient. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The police found Sarah the next morning, huddled in the corner of the room, her eyes wide and vacant. She wouldn't speak. She wouldn't move. The only thing she could do was mutter one thing over and over again.
"Don't look. Don't look. Don't look."
Room 213 is still available at the Calhoun Hotel, but no one stays there for long. And if you ever find yourself in that room, whatever you do, don't look in the mirror.